Welcome to Poirot's Mysteries, where we dive into the timeless tales of the world's greatest detective, Hercule Poirot. I'm your host, Nolan Drake, bringing you these stories in a warm, conversational style, perfect for relaxing on a quiet evening. Today, we embark on a brand new original mystery inspired by the Queen of Crime herself, Agatha Christie, Hercule Poirot, and the Manor's dark past. This is a long-form story, clocking in at over 90 minutes, so grab your favourite cup of tea, settle in, and let the intrigue unfold. Chapter 1. The Summons from Blackthorn Manor. 2,000 words. The fog that evening was of the thick yellow variety that swallowed gas lamps whole, and turned the Thames into a ribbon of molten pewter. It pressed against the tall windows of Whitehaven mansions like a living thing, muffling the clop of hooves on the embankment, and the distant cry of a newsboy hawking the evening editions. Another society scandal! Heir to Blackwood fortune in disgrace. Inside flat 203, Hercule Poirot sat in his favourite green velvet armchair, legs crossed with geometric precision, a small porcelain cup of tisane balanced on one knee. The room was a shrine to order. Books alphabetized by author and height, shoes aligned at perfect right angles beneath the hall stand, and a single white camellia in a crystal bud vase on the mantel, its petals arranged so that each faced the room at an identical angle. Poirot's green eyes, bright as a cat's in the firelight, were fixed not on the fog, but on the letter in his lap. The envelope was heavy cream stock, sealed with crimson wax impressed by a signet ring, a raven clutching a broken arrow. The Blackwood crest. Captain Arthur Hastings, tall, honest, perpetually boyish, despite the silver at his temples, paced the Persian rug with the restless energy of a retriever denied its walk. He had burst in 20 minutes earlier, cheeks flushed from the cold, waving the same envelope like a battle standard. "Poirot, you must read it. Sir Reginald Blackwood himself, inviting you, personally, to Blackthorn Manor for the weekend. Says it's to celebrate the unveiling of a family heirloom, but dash it all, there's something havey-cavey about the wording. Listen to this bit, and perhaps, monsieur, you might lend your singular talents to laying certain old ghosts to rest." "Ghosts? In a country house? I ask you." Poirot raised one expressive eyebrow. "Hastings, mon ami, you have the imagination of a schoolboy and the discretion of a town crier. Sit, drink your whisky, and cease treading upon my aubusson with those muddy boots." Hastings obeyed, perching on the edge of the sofa and cradling the tumbler Poirot poured for him. The detective, meanwhile, slit the envelope with a silver letter opener shaped like a miniature sword. The paper inside was thick, almost velvety, and the handwriting bold yet tremulous, as though the pen had been gripped too tightly. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot, you will forgive the presumption of a stranger, but your reputation precedes you like a herald. This coming Friday, I host a small gathering to mark the return of a Blackwood heirloom long believed lost, a dagger said to have belonged to my great-grandfather, Lord Harlan Blackwood, who vanished from this very house in 1850, under circumstances most mysterious. The manor has its legends, doors that lock themselves, footsteps in empty corridors, a study sealed for 3/4 of a century, its key lost with its master. I do not ask you to chase phantoms, monsieur, only to be present should any guest require the reassurance of logic in the face of superstition. My motor will collect you from Victoria at 3 o'clock. Do say you will come. The fogs of London grow wearisome, and the downs are golden with autumn. Yours in hope, Sir Reginald Blackwood Poirot, folded the letter with deliberate creases, each corner aligning perfectly. "Curious," he murmured. "A locked room from 1850, eh? And now a dagger returned after 76 years. One does not need the nose of a bloodhound to scent that something is pas naturel." Hastings leaned forward. "You'll go, then?" "Naturellement. The little grey cells, they are restless." Besides, Poirot permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. Sir Reginald's chef is said to rival the Savoy. One does not refuse soufflé Rothschild lightly. Cut to the following afternoon. The Blackwood Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek funereal black with crimson piping, glides through the Sussex lanes like a shark through green waters. Inside, Poirot sits ramrod straight, gloved hands resting on the head of his Malacca cane. Hastings, opposite, pores over a dog-eared copy of the Times, occasionally glancing out at the passing scenery. "Look there, Poirot. Blackwood Village. Quaint little place. Pub called the Raven's Wing. Church with a Saxon tower. And, good Lord, is that the manor?" Rising from a fold in the Downs, Blackwood Manor was a monument to Gothic exuberance. 3 stories of honey-coloured stone, pepperpot turrets, gargoyles wearing centuries of lichen like verdigris jewellery. Ivy, thick, almost prehensile, clawed at the walls as though trying to drag the house back into the earth. The drive curved through an avenue of yews so ancient their branches interlocked overhead, forming a tunnel of perpetual twilight. The car crunched to a halt on gravel the colour of bone. The front door, oak-studded with iron, large enough to admit a carriage, swung open before the chauffeur could alight. A figure stood silhouetted against the glow of the entrance hall. Tall, stooped, dressed in immaculate black. "Mr. Graves," Hastings whispered, "the butler. Looks like he's been carved from the same stone as the gargoyles." Graves inclined his head with the solemnity of an undertaker. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Sir Reginald awaits you in the long gallery. This way, if you please." They stepped into a hall that smelled of beeswax, wood smoke, and something faintly metallic. Old blood, perhaps, or just the tang of centuries. Suits of armour lined the walls, their visors raised like empty eyes. A grandfather clock ticked with the ponderous authority of a judge passing sentence. From somewhere deep in the house came the faint rhythmic thud of a distant hammer, tap, 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 as though a coffin were being nailed shut. The long gallery ran the length of the east wing, its ceiling painted with faded frescoes of the Blackwood arms impaling those of long-forgotten brides. Portraits glared down. A cavalier with a cruel mouth, a Regency buck with dissipated eyes, a Victorian matriarch clutching a fan like a weapon. At the far end, beneath a stained-glass window depicting the family crest, stood Sir Reginald Blackwood. He was a big man gone slightly to seed, broad shoulders straining at a tweed jacket, a florid face framed by a mane of iron-grey hair. His handshake was hearty, almost too hearty, as though he were trying to convince himself of his own bonhomie. "Poirot! By Jove, you're smaller than I expected. No offence. The photographs make you look like a blasted gnome. And Hastings, good to see a familiar face from the old regiment. Come, let me introduce the house party before cocktails." He gestured expansively. The guests were arranged like pieces on a chessboard. Cocktails were served. Martinis for the men, sherry for the ladies, a thimble of crème de menthe for Poirot, who sipped it with the air of a connoisseur sampling poison. Conversation flowed in careful eddies. Poirot listened, his gaze drifting to the stained-glass window. The raven in the crest seemed to watch him, beak open in a silent scream. Dinner was announced at 8. The dining room was a cavern of dark oak panelling, lit by a chandelier that trembled in the draught. The table groaned under silver platters. Consommé Olga, sole meunière, saddle of mutton with red currant jelly, and finally the promised soufflé Rothschild. Golden, quivering, served with a sauce of apricots and armagnac. Poirot ate with delicate precision, but his attention was elsewhere. Halfway through the fish course, Sir Reginald raised his glass. "To absent friends," he said, his voice suddenly hollow, "and to secrets long buried." A silence fell, broken only by the tick-tock of the ormolu clock on the sideboard. Lady Evelyn's hand trembled. A drop of wine fell like blood onto the damask cloth. Victor laughed too loudly. Clara stared at her plate. Dr. Hawthorne cleared his throat. Mrs. Winters smiled, a thin, wintry smile that did not reach her eyes. Later, as the ladies withdrew and the men lit cigars, Sir Reginald drew Poirot aside beneath a portrait of Lord Harlan Blackwood, the vanished ancestor. The painting showed a man in his 40s, hawk-nosed, with the same iron-grey hair as his descendant. One hand rested on a globe. The other was hidden in the folds of his coat. "My great-grandfather," Sir Reginald said quietly, "disappeared from the locked study on All Hallows' Eve, 1850. Door bolted from within, windows barred, no trace, save a single drop of blood on the blotter and a raven's feather on the windowsill. The family called it the Curse of Blackwood Manor. I prefer to call it unfinished business." Poirot studied the portrait. "And the dagger that returns tomorrow, it was his?" "Found in a pawnshop in Cairo, of all places. The blade is Damascus steel, the hilt ivory carved with ravens. Harlan's initials are engraved on the tang. I mean to display it in the study, the very room where he vanished. Perhaps then the old boy can rest." "Or perhaps," Poirot murmured, "the past will demand a reckoning." Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Thunder rolled across the downs like artillery. Rain lashed the windows. Lightning illuminated the gallery for a heartbeat, and in that flash, Poirot saw it. A shadow moving where no shadow should be, behind the suit of armour at the far end of the room. He blinked. The shadow was gone. Midnight found Poirot and Hastings in their adjoining rooms on the second floor. The guest chambers were luxurious but oppressive. 4-poster beds swathed in burgundy velvet. Tapestries depicting the labours of Hercules, an irony not lost on the detective. A fire crackled in the grate, but the warmth did little to dispel the chill. Hastings in striped pyjamas paced before the hearth. "I say, Poirot, this place gives me the willies. Did you see Lady Evelyn at dinner? Looked like she'd seen a ghost. And that sister, Mrs. Winters, she watches everyone like a hawk. Mark my words, there's trouble brewing." Poirot, already in bed, his moustache guarded by a net, waved a dismissive hand. "Trouble, oui, but of the human variety, not spectral. Observe, Hastings, 6 people in this house, each with a secret. Sir Reginald fears the past. Lady Evelyn fears the future. Victor fears poverty. Clara fears something she dare not name. Dr. Hawthorne fears exposure, and Mrs. Winters, she fears losing what she believes is hers by right." He switched off the bedside lamp. "Sleep, mon ami. Tomorrow the dagger arrives, and with it, perhaps, the key to the manor's dark heart." In the darkness, the storm raged on. Somewhere in the house, a door creaked. Footsteps whispered along a corridor. A woman sobbed once, then stifled the sound. And in the locked study at the end of the east wing, sealed since 1850, its key long lost, a single candle guttered to life, though no hand had struck the match. Chapter 2. The Locked Study and the Silent Dagger. The scream came at 12:17 a.m., a single tearing note that began as a man's roar and ended in a gurgle, as though a hand had been clapped over the mouth mid-cry. It sliced through the manor's slumber like a shard of glass through silk. Hercule Poirot was already awake. He had not removed his patent leather shoes. The little Belgian slept, when he slept at all, in a state of perpetual readiness. He was at his door before the echo died, Malacca cane in one hand, electric torch in the other. Captain Hastings stumbled after him, hair tousled, revolver clutched like a talisman. They were not alone. Doors flew open along the corridor like startled eyes. Lady Evelyn appeared in a peach silk dressing gown, pearls askew, face bleached to the colour of candle wax. Victor Blackwood, shirt unbuttoned, eyes wild, pushed past her. Clara Thorne clutched a candle that trembled in her fist, wax dripping onto her bare toes. Dr. Hawthorne, spectacles fogged, fumbled with his medical bag. Mrs. Winters, black wrapper buttoned to the throat, moved with the calm of a woman who had long ago ceased to be surprised by violence. The butler, Graves, met them at the foot of the servants' stair. His face was the colour of old parchment. "The master's study, sir. He retired there after brandy, said he wished to be alone with the dagger. The door is bolted from within. I heard the cry." The study lay at the far end of a narrow passage lined with ancestral portraits, whose eyes seemed to follow the procession. The door was ancient oak, iron-bound, the lock a heavy mortise of Victorian manufacture. A brass key protruded from the keyhole, turned unmistakably from the inside. Victor rattled the handle. "Uncle, open up!" Silence. He threw his shoulder against the wood. It did not budge. Dr. Hawthorne pressed an ear to the panel. No breath, no movement. Poirot's torch beam danced across the frame. No splintered wood, no pry marks. He knelt, examining the gap beneath the door. A draught, faint but present. The room breathes, yet the door is sealed. He rose, eyes glittering. We break it. 3 heaves, Victor, Hastings, Graves, and the lock shrieked in surrender. The door swung inward, on darkness thick as velvet. The study had not been entered in 76 years, yet someone had prepared it for its ghost. A fire burned low in the grate, casting sanguine shadows over walls panelled in dark walnut. Books, leather spines cracked with age, lined the shelves. A massive partner's desk dominated the centre, its green leather top scarred by generations of quills. Upon a black velvet cushion lay the returned heirloom, the Damascus dagger, its blade a ripple of watered steel, the ivory hilt carved with ravens in mid-flight. The candle beside it had burned to a stub, wax pooled like clotting blood. Sir Reginald Blackwood sat slumped forward in the high-backed chair, arms sprawled across the blotter. The dagger protruded from between his shoulder blades, hilt flush to the tweed, blade buried to the forte. A dark stain spread across his waistcoat, slow and deliberate, as though the cloth itself were drinking him in. His eyes were open, fixed on the hearth in an expression of mild surprise, as if death had arrived with an unexpected jest. Poirot moved first. He touched the carotid, cool, pulseless. Mort depuis une demi-heure, peut-être moins. He sniffed the air, brandy, beeswax, and beneath it the sweet metallic tang of fresh blood. No scent of gunpowder, no scorch marks, only the dagger. Hastings gagged. Locked from the inside, windows barred. How in blazes? Silence. Poirot's voice cut like a scalpel. He circled the room with the precision of a watchmaker. The windows, mullioned, leaded, each pane intact, iron bars on the outside, corroded but solid. The chimney, wide enough for a sweep, but a heavy iron fire screen blocked it, and soot lay undisturbed. The floor? Persian rug, no trapdoor evident. The walls? Solid panelling, no hollow echo when tapped. He returned to the door. The key still protruded on the inside. He grasped it, turned, click, then withdrew it, examining the wards. No duplicate, no wax impression, the lock is untouched. Lady Evelyn swayed. Dr. Hawthorne caught her, guiding her to a leather armchair, where she sat staring at the corpse as though it were a stranger. Clara began to cry, soft, hiccuping sobs. Mrs. Winters crossed herself, lips moving in Latin. Victor poured brandy with shaking hands, downed it in one gulp, poured another. Graves stood rooted. I locked the master in myself at 11:30. He insisted, said he wished to commune with the past. I heard nothing until the scream. Poirot's gaze swept the desk. An inkstand overturned, black rivulets spidering across scattered papers. A half-finished letter. My dear Victor, the time has come to face. A railway timetable circled in red. A photograph of Lord Harlan Blackwood, identical to the portrait in the gallery, but younger, smiling. And beneath the body's right hand, a single raven's feather, glossy black, its tip stained crimson. Curious, Poirot murmured. The feather matches the crest, yet ravens do not bleed. He lifted the photograph. On the reverse, in faded ink, to my beloved brother, may the truth stay buried. A.W., Mrs. Winters' initials. Poirot's moustache bristled. Superstition is the refuge of the untidy mind. Observe, the wound is vertical, between the scapulae, delivered by a hand taller than the victim, or by the victim himself. Yet the angle is wrong for suicide. The dagger is driven with force. Sir Reginald was a heavy man. And the scream, why scream if one stabs oneself? He examined the dagger's hilt. No fingerprints in the blood, wiped clean. But on the ivory, a faint smudge. Lipstick, the shade of crushed raspberries. Lady Evelyn's shade. Dr. Hawthorne knelt beside the body, probing gently. Instantaneous. The blade severed the aorta. He would have been dead before the echo faded. Outside, lightning cracked. For an instant the room was lit, as though by magnesium flare. Every face etched in terror, every shadow sharpened to a blade. In that flash, Poirot saw it, a gloved hand withdrawing, behind the arras beside the fireplace. He whirled, but the tapestry hung motionless. Mon Dieu, he breathed, the manor is not empty tonight. Chapter 3. The Geometry of Suspicion. The morning room smelled of damp wool and fried bacon. Grey light filtered through tall windows, turning the silver teapot the colour of a corpse's cheek. Poirot stood at the head of the table like a general surveying a battlefield, hands clasped behind his back, moustache waxed to lethal points. Inspector Japp, square, red-faced, smelling of railway coffee, flanked him, notebook open, pencil poised. The house party sat in a ragged semicircle, breakfast untouched. Lady Evelyn's eyes were swollen. She clutched a lace handkerchief, as though it were a life raft. Victor nursed a black coffee, knuckles white on the cup. Clara's auburn curls were pinned severely, but a single strand had escaped, trembling with every breath. Dr. Hawthorne cleaned his spectacles in slow, hypnotic circles. Mrs. Winters buttered toast with the precision of a surgeon. Graves hovered by the sideboard, refilling cups no one drank. Poirot began without preamble. Mesdames et messieurs, we proceed with order and method. First, the timeline. Captain Hastings, your notes. Hastings cleared his throat. 11:27 p.m. Graves locks Sir Reginald in the study with the dagger. 11:29. Graves returns below stairs. Cook confirms. 11:45. Victor seen by Clara leaving the billiard room. 11:52. Lady Evelyn retires, passing Dr. Hawthorne on the landing. 12:03. Mrs. Winters rings for warm milk. Housemaid delivers. 12:17. Scream. 12:19. Door breached. Jap grunted. Tight. 4 minutes from milk to murder. Who was unaccounted for? Silence. The clock on the mantel ticked like a metronome counting heartbeats. Poirot's gaze moved from face to face. We begin with proximity. The study lies at the end of the east corridor. To reach it unseen, one must pass the grandfather clock on the landing. Its chime is distinctive. Who heard it strike 12? Clara raised a trembling hand. I did. I was reading in my room, directly above the study. The chime woke me. Then footsteps, soft, like slippers on carpet. Victor snorted. Probably Graves doing his rounds. Graves inclined his head. I was in the butler's pantry, sir, polishing the silver. The clock carries, but I heard no footsteps. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet someone walked. Mademoiselle Thorne, direction. Towards the study, then nothing, until the scream. Dr. Hawthorne replaced his spectacles. I was in the library researching insomnia treatments for Lady Evelyn. The clock chimed. I noted the time. I heard no footsteps. Convenient, Mrs. Winters said acidly. The library is at the opposite end of the house. Poirot ignored her. Next, the wound. Dr. Hawthorne, your examination. Hawthorne stood, medical bag in hand. Single thrust, downward angle, severing the aorta. Death, within seconds. The dagger entered to the hilt, considerable force. Sir Reginald was seated, facing the fire. The killer stood behind him. Height? Jap barked. 5'10", perhaps 6 foot, or taller if stooping. The blade's angle suggests the victim's head was tilted forward, reading perhaps. Poirot nodded. The half-written letter. My dear Victor, the time has come to face what, monsieur? He turned to the nephew. Victor flushed. Debts. Uncle was cutting my allowance. We argued at dinner. He wanted me to sign papers renouncing my claim to the estate if I didn't reform. I refused. Lady Evelyn's voice was a thread. Reginald was distraught. He spoke of ending the Blackwood line's shame. The dagger's return. It unhinged him. Mrs. Winters set down her knife with a clink. Shame? He meant my shame. Our great-grandfather's disappearance. Reginald believed it was murder, not suicide. He had proof, letters. He threatened to expose the family. Jap's pencil scratched. Where are these letters? In the study safe, Graves said quietly. Behind the portrait of Lord Harlan. Sir Reginald opened it last night, after locking the door. Poirot's torchbeam had revealed the safe. A modern Chubb, its dial still set to the last combination. Inside, a bundle of yellowed envelopes tied with faded ribbon, and a small leather-bound journal. Poirot had left them untouched for the police, but not before noting the top letter's salutation. To my dear sister Agatha, forgive me. Mrs. Winters paled. He had no right. Poirot continued. We return to the impossible. The door bolted from within. The key on the inside. Yet the killer entered, struck, and vanished. Observe! He produced a sheet of paper, sketching rapidly. The study layout. Desk here, windows here, door here, chimney here. No secret passages. Jap's men searched. The bars outside the windows, rusted but intact. The gap beneath the door, 1 inch, insufficient for a key to pass. He tapped the sketch. Therefore, the killer was inside when Graves locked the door, or the lock was tampered with after the crime. Victor laughed nervously. You're saying one of us was hiding in there with Uncle for nearly an hour? Possible, Poirot said. The room is large. The arras by the fireplace, deep shadows. A person could conceal themselves. Dr. Hawthorne frowned, but the scream, Sir Reginald would have cried out the moment he saw an intruder. Unless, Poirot said softly, the intruder was expected. Silence fell. thick as the fog outside. Japp broke it. Alibis, Lady Evelyn. I took a sleeping draught at 11:50. Dr. Hawthorne can confirm he prepared it. I was in my room until the scream. Hawthorne nodded. Laudanum, 8 drops. She would have been unconscious within 20 minutes. Yet you were in the library until midnight? Researching, Hawthorne repeated. I left at 12:05, past Mrs. Winters's door, heard her radio playing softly, reached my room at 12:10. The scream woke me. Mrs. Winters smiled thinly. I suffer insomnia. The wireless helps. I was awake until the housemaid brought milk at 12:03. She can confirm. Clara twisted her handkerchief. I read until the clock chimed, then blew out my candle. I heard the footsteps, then nothing. Victor drained his coffee. Billiards until 11:45. Clara saw me leave. I went to my room, smoked a cigarette on the balcony. The storm was coming. I watched the lightning, alone. Graves spoke last. Below stairs from 11:29. Cook, scullery maid, and boot boy can vouch. I was polishing the Regency candelabra, silver nitrate stains on my cuffs to prove it. Poirot paced. All accounted for, yet the geometry is wrong. Someone lies. He stopped before Clara. Mademoiselle, the footsteps you heard towards the study, did they pause, hesitate? Clara's eyes widened. Yes, outside my door, for a moment, then continued. Poirot whirled to Victor. Your room is next to hers. The balcony connects both. You claim to be outside, yet Clara hears footsteps inside the corridor. Victor opened his mouth, closed it. I went inside to fetch matches, briefly. Matches, Poirot repeated. Yet your cigarette case, silver, monogrammed, lies on the billiard table, untouched. Japp's eyes gleamed. We'll check the balcony door for fingerprints. Poirot raised a hand. Unnecessary. Observe the lipstick on the dagger. Crushed raspberry, Lady Evelyn's shade. Yet she was drugged. Therefore, the smudge was planted. A red herring. He turned to the company. The killer wishes us to chase shadows, but Hercule Poirot chases facts. And the first fact is this. The raven's feather beneath Sir Reginald's hand. It was not there when Graves locked the door. Graves swears the desk was bare, save the dagger and candle. Therefore, the feather was placed after death. By whom, and why? Outside, a raven landed on the windowsill, cocked its head, and croaked once. A sound like a coffin lid closing. Chapter 4. The safe, the scrap, and the smudge. The study had been sealed since dawn, but the smell of blood lingered like cheap perfume. Inspector Japp's men, 2 constables in heavy boots, stood guard outside the splintered door. Inside, Poirot worked alone, gloved hands moving with the reverence of a priest at an altar. The dagger lay on a velvet tray, bagged for fingerprints. The body had been removed to the ice house. Only a chalk outline remained, arms flung wide as though embracing an invisible partner. Poirot began with the safe. The Chubb dial clicked under his fingers. 4 turns left, 3 right, 2 left, until the mechanism sighed open. Inside, the bundle of letters, the journal, and something new. A single sheet of modern notepaper, folded once, its edge torn jaggedly. He unfolded it, with tweezers. Burn this when read. The truth about Harlan is poison. If R speaks, the estate is forfeit. Meet me in the study at 11:45. Come alone. Victor's handwriting. Poirot had seen it on the billiard room score sheet. The tear ran through the signature, as though the writer had hesitated mid-stroke. Poirot slipped the note into an envelope, then turned to the letters. Yellowed, brittle, tied with faded ribbon. The top one, dated 1849, was in a spidery copperplate. My dear sister Agatha, the Raven knows. I have seen the ledger. Father's fortune was never his. It was stolen from the East India Company, blood money for opium. If I speak, we hang. Destroy this. Harlan. The ribbon snapped under Poirot's fingers. Beneath lay the journal, Lord Harlan's, its leather cover cracked like old skin. The final entry, 30th of October, 1850. Tonight I confront A. She will not yield. The dagger is ready. If I vanish, look to the raven. Poirot closed the journal. So, the dark past is greed, not ghost. He moved to the desk. The overturned inkwell had dried into a black lake. In its centre, half submerged, lay another scrap, smaller, singed at the edges. Poirot fished it out with forceps. It read, in Sir Reginald's bold hand, "Cannot let the boy inherit ruin." The rest was ash. Footsteps in the corridor. Japp entered, rubbing rain from his moustache. Fingerprints, Poirot. Daggers clean, wiped with a silk handkerchief, but the key, inside the lock, 2 smudges. One is Sir Reginald's, the other, thumb, right hand, fresh. Not in the files. Whose? Working on it. Also, the bars outside the window. Rust flaked off one. Fresh scrape. Someone climbed, maybe. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Show me. They stepped onto the narrow balcony that ran beneath the study windows. Ivy clung thick as rope. One tendril had been snapped, its sap still oozing. Below, the gravel path was churned bootprints, size 10 deep in the heel. They led to the rose bed, then vanished onto the lawn. "Victor's boots," Japp said, "size 10, and look." He pointed to a smear of mud on the balustrade. "He was out here." Poirot knelt. "Non. Observe the angle. The prints faced toward the house. Someone descended after the rain started, after midnight. Yet Victor claims he was on his balcony before the storm." Japp whistled. "So he climbed down, then up again? Or someone wore his boots." Poirot scraped a sample of the mud into a vial. "Garden soil, rich in clay. The rose bed was manured yesterday. Graves mentioned it. We check shoes." Back inside, Poirot examined the raven's feather under a magnifying glass. "Tail feather, common raven. The blood is Sir Reginald's, type O, but the tip," he scraped with a scalpel, "is stained with lipstick, crushed raspberry. Yet Lady Evelyn's lips bear no trace this morning. The smudge was applied after the blood dried." Japp scratched his head. "Planted? Precisely. Like the note in the safe. Observe." Poirot held the torn scrap beside the singed fragment. The tear aligned perfectly. One sheet, torn in haste. The burner claimed half, the desk the rest. Sir Reginald wrote to Victor, then thought better. He tore the note, burned part, kept part. Why? They were interrupted by Hastings, breathless. "Poirot! You'll want to see this in the library wastebasket." He held a crumpled sheet. A forgery of Victor's handwriting, practicing the phrase "meet me in the study" at 11:45. The ink was fresh. Clara's room, Hastings added, under her blotter, and this, a silk handkerchief, monogrammed CT, stained with raspberry lipstick and a faint smear of blood. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mademoiselle Thorne, she plants evidence against Victor. Why?" Japp's men brought the suspects to the morning room. Clara entered last, eyes red-rimmed. Poirot laid the handkerchief on the table. "Explain." Clara's voice was small. "It's mine. I lost it yesterday, in the gallery. Someone must have taken it." "Someone who wears your lipstick to frame you?" Poirot's tone was gentle, deadly. "Or someone you frame?" Victor surged forward. "She's covering for me. I was with her. Silence!" Poirot snapped. "You were on the balcony, but not alone. The mud on your cuffs, garden clay. You went to the rose bed after the murder. Why?" Victor swallowed. "I heard the scream. Ran down the servant's stair, saw the prints, panicked, thought they were mine." "Liar," Mrs. Winters said coldly. You killed him for the inheritance. Dr. Hawthorne adjusted his tie. Or to silence him. Sir Reginald discovered my prescriptions, morphine, for Lady Evelyn's nerves. He threatened to report me. Lady Evelyn gasped. Elias! Poirot raised a hand. Enough! We have motives, greed, fear, revenge. But the method? He returned to the study, the others trailing. He pointed to the arras by the fireplace. Captain Hastings, pull! Hastings tugged. The tapestry swung aside, revealing a narrow door, panelling disguised as wall. It was locked, but the key from the desk fit. Beyond, a spiral stair, dusty, descending into darkness. A priest's hole, Japp breathed, from the Reformation, leads to the wine cellar. Poirot shone his torch. Footprints, small stockinged feet. Someone hid here, entered after Graves locked the door, struck, then fled down the stair. The scream was Sir Reginald discovering the intruder. The bolt was thrown after the killer left, by a string through the keyhole, pulled from the corridor. He demonstrated with twine. The key turns, the string withdraws under the door. Classic. Clara whispered, but the feather, planted from the corridor. The arras hides a slit. A hand reaches through, drops the feather. The lipstick, transferred from the handkerchief stolen earlier. Japp nodded. So the killer knew the priest's hole. Poirot's eyes swept the room. Only someone familiar with the manor's secrets. Graves, Mrs. Winters, or... He stopped at the chimney. Soot had been disturbed. A single black smudge on the fire screen. Someone small, Poirot murmured. Someone who could fit. He turned to Clara. Mademoiselle, your slippers, size 3. The prints in the priest's hole are size 3, stockinged. You hid, waited, struck when Sir Reginald turned to the safe. You fled down the stair, planted the feather through the arras, then returned to your room. The handkerchief, your own, used to wipe the dagger, then hidden to implicate yourself less than Victor. Clara's face crumpled. He was going to send me away. Said I was a burden. Victor promised to marry me, if the money was ours. Victor lunged. You little... Japp restrained him. Clara Thorne, I'm arresting you. Poirot raised a hand. No. Observe the soot. The smudge is above the screen. 5'6", mademoiselle, is 5'2". She could not reach. Silence. The grandfather clock struck 3 off-key. Poirot smiled. The killer is still among us, and the priest's hole was a blind. The true exit, he pointed to the window. One bar was loose, pried from its socket, then replaced. Was here, the ivy held, the rain washed the lower prints. The upper bar was loosened before the murder, tightened after the feather, dropped from the balcony as the killer descended. He turned to Victor. Your boots, your height, your motive. You climbed up after the scream, planted the feather to mimic the curse, then descended again. The torn note, your uncle's warning. You burned half, kept half to frame Clara. Victor's face twisted. Prove it. Poirot held up the vial of mud. Clay from the rosebed matches your cuffs and the bar. He twisted it free. On the inner side, a fingerprint in blood. Victor's, Japp snapped cuffs. Victor Blackwood, you're nicked. As Victor was led away, Poirot sighed. The dark past claimed another Blackwood, but not by curse, by greed. Chapter 5. The Second Key and the Poisoned Brandy. The drawing-room smelled of wet wool and fear. A coal fire hissed in the grate, throwing long shadows across the turkey rug. Poirot stood before the mantel, hands clasped behind his back, the little Belgian silhouetted like a chess king among pawns. The remaining suspects sat in a ragged half-circle. Lady Evelyn, pale as parchment. Dr. Hawthorne, spectacles fogged. Mrs. Winters, black bombazine rustling like dry leaves. Clara Thorne, eyes swollen but dry. Graves poured tea no one touched. Inspector Japp burst in, rain dripping from his mackintosh. "Poirot, you'll want to see this. The brandy decanter in the study. Arsenic, enough to fell a horse, but slow." Sir Reginald took one sip at 11:15. Graves poured it. The stab came later, post-mortem. The poison was the real murder weapon. Poirot's moustache bristled. Then Victor's climb, the dagger, diversion. The locked room was never the point. The point was time. He turned to Graves. "You served the brandy." Graves inclined his head. "Yes, sir. From the cellar. The decanter was sealed when I brought it up." Poirot produced a small glass vial. "Yet this residue, arsenic crystals, clings to the stopper. Someone opened it after you left the study." Japp held up a second object. A brass key, identical to the one in the study door, found in the priest's holster. "Duplicate, freshly cut. Locksmith in Lewis confirms. Ordered 2 days ago by Mrs. A. Winters." Mrs. Winters did not flinch. "I ordered it for the wine cellar. The old key snapped." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Yet the wine cellar lock is Yale. This is Mortice. You had the study key copied. Why?" She smiled thinly. "Reginald changed the combination on the safe. I needed access to family papers." Hawthorne cleared his throat. "The arsenic, my bag. I keep Fowler's solution for Lady Evelyn's hysteria. Someone stole a vial." Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat. "Elias!" Poirot raised a palm. "Patience, we reconstruct." 11:15. Graves pours brandy, leaves. Sir Reginald drinks, feels ill, locks the door to think. The poison acts slowly. At 11:45, someone enters with the duplicate key, finds him weakened, stabs him to hasten death, plants the raven's feather, exits, locks again with string trick. But the stab is post-mortem. The scream was the poison's onset. Clara whispered, "Then Victor." "Victor climbed after the scream," Poirot said, "to plant the feather and frame himself as the obvious suspect. A double bluff. He believed the stab was the murder. He did not know about the poison." Japp frowned. "So who poisoned the brandy?" Poirot paced. "The arsenic was added before Graves poured. The decanter was tampered with in the cellar. Who has access?" Graves. "Only myself and the housekeeper." Poirot. "Yet the cellar door was jemmied last night. Marks fresh. Someone entered from the kitchen garden." He produced a muddy footprint cast in plaster. Size 6 narrow heel. Lady Evelyn's evening slipper. Found in the boot room, sole caked in cellar mould. Lady Evelyn's voice trembled. I walk in my sleep. Dr. Hawthorne knows." Hawthorne nodded. "Somnambulism. She took a draught at 11:02. I watched her retire." Poirot's gaze softened, then hardened. "Yet the draught was your prescription. Laudanum, 8 drops. Enough to sedate, not kill. But the vial in your bag, half empty. You gave her 4 drops only. She woke, walked, poisoned the brandy under your instruction, returned to bed. You followed, staged the stab with Victor's dagger, stolen from the display case earlier, then climbed down the ivy to plant the feather. Victor saw you, thought to take the blame himself to protect. Clara!" Hawthorne stood. "Absurd! I was in the library." Poirot held up the forged note from Chapter 4. "Your handwriting. You practiced Victor's script to plant the torn scrap. The priest's whole key. Yours. Ordered under Mrs. Winters's name to deflect suspicion. The arsenic. Your vial. The motive," he turned to Lady Evelyn. "The estate. Sir Reginald discovered your affair. Planned to divorce you. Leave everything to charity. You and Hawthorne planned to marry. Claim the fortune." Lady Evelyn began to weep. "He was cruel. The morphine. He found my stash. Threatened to institutionalize me." Hawthorne lunged for the door. Japp tackled him. Elias Hawthorne, you're under arrest!" Poirot raised a hand. "Non, observe," he pointed to the tea tray. Graves had poured Mrs. Winters a cup, steaming, untouched. "The arsenic residue on the decanter matches the crystals in your teacup, madame. You poisoned the brandy first, then Hawthorne added the stab to cover your tracks. You ordered the key to frame him, the sleepwalking, your suggestion to Evelyn, to muddy the waters." Mrs. Winters's cup rattled in its saucer. "You cannot prove." Poirot produced a telegram. "From the Lewis locksmith. The key was collected by a woman in black veil. Your height, your voice, and the journal." He opened Harlan's diary to a new page, previously hidden. "A pressed raven's feather, annotated in your hand, for the next Blackwood who dares. You killed Harlan in 1850, faked his disappearance, inherited through Reginald's father. Now you kill again to protect the secret." Mrs. Winters laughed. A dry, cracking sound. Clever little man, but the safe. Poirot opened it. The letters were gone. Only ash remained. "Burned this morning," Japp said, "by you, in the kitchen range." Mrs. Winters stood, regal. "Then you have nothing." Poirot smiled. "I have the feather, the one you pressed in 1850. DNA will match the blood to Harlan's line. And the duplicate key, your fingerprints in the wax impression." She lunged for the fire poker. Graves intercepted, pinning her arms. Japp cuffed her. As she was led away, Mrs. Winters spat. "The raven always returns." Poirot watched her go. And Hercule Poirot always catches it. Chapter 6. The Final Assembly and the Truth of the Raven. The long gallery had been transformed into a courtroom. Portraits of the Blackwood ancestors glared down, as though judging their own descendants. A single chandelier burned, its crystals trembling in the draught. At the far end, beneath the stained-glass raven, Hercule Poirot stood on a low dais, hands clasped, green eyes luminous. The suspects sat in a semicircle. Inspector Japp leaned against a suit of armour, arms folded. Hastings hovered near Poirot, notebook ready. Poirot began without ceremony. "Mesdames et messieurs, we have chased shadows long enough. 3 weapons have been proposed: poison, dagger, and the locked room itself. 3 killers have been accused: Victor Hawthorne, Mrs. Winters. Yet the truth is simpler and older than any of you imagine." He produced the Damascus dagger, now cleaned, and laid it on a velvet cushion. "This blade never killed Sir Reginald. The wound was post-mortem. The poison, arsenic, was real, but not fatal in the dose administered. The true cause of death, a single precise injection to the carotid, delivered by a hypodermic needle. The puncture was hidden beneath the dagger's entry. Dr. Hawthorne's specialty." Hawthorne started. "I was searched." Poirot held up a glass syringe, sealed in evidence. "Found in the priest's hole, wrapped in your handkerchief. The needle bears traces of curare, paralytic, instantaneous. You entered with the duplicate key at 12:10, found Sir Reginald weakened by arsenic, injected him, stabbed to conceal the puncture, planted the feather, exited via the ivy. Victor saw you descend, assumed the stab was the murder, climbed after to plant evidence against himself." He turned to Mrs. Winters. "You provided the arsenic, stolen from Hawthorne's bag weeks ago. You believed it would kill. When it did not, you signalled Hawthorne from the corridor. 3 taps on the radiator pipe. He finished the task." Mrs. Winters sneered. "Fantasy." Poirot opened Harlan's journal to the pressed raven's feather. "This feather is not from 1850. The barbs are modern, dyed with aniline, a 20th century process. You forged the entry, madame, to resurrect the curse. The original journal, burned in the kitchen range, contained no such page. I recovered a fragment from the ashes. He held up a singed corner. "The raven is a lie," Lady Evelyn sobbed. "Reginald knew. He found the forgery. He was going to expose us all." Poirot nodded. Exposure of the opium fortune, the fake curse, the insurance fraud on Harlan's death. But the true killer needed more than silence. He needed the estate intact. He turned to Graves. The butler did not move. "Sir," Poirot's voice softened, "you have served this family 30 years. You knew every secret passage, every loose bar, every combination. You ordered the duplicate key, not Mrs. Winter's. The locksmith described a tall man in a chauffeur's cap. You wore it. You poisoned the brandy with arsenic to weaken Sir Reginald, then used the priest's hole to enter at 12:15. You injected the curare, stolen from Hawthorne's bag during a routine medical visit. You stabbed post-mortem to mimic the curse. You planted the modern feather to resurrect the legend. You even loosened the window bar weeks ago, knowing Victor would be blamed." Graves's face remained impassive. Motive? Poirot produced a birth certificate, yellowed but official. "You are Harlan Blackwood's illegitimate son, born 1870, hidden in the village, raised as Graves. Sir Reginald discovered it last month. He planned to acknowledge you in his will, cutting out Victor, Evelyn, everyone. You would inherit everything. But acknowledgement meant exposure of the opium fortune's taint. The title would be stripped. You chose murder over disgrace." He laid a final object on the cushion. A small silver locket, opened to reveal a miniature portrait of a young woman. Harlan's mistress, Graves's mother. Graves's mask cracked. "He promised me the manor. Then he wavered, said the shame was too great. I gave him 30 years of service. He owed me." Poirot's voice was gentle. "You locked the door from the inside with the original key, exited via the priest's hole, pulled the string to turn the bolt from the corridor, then descended to the cellar. You returned upstairs after the scream, leading the charge to discover the body. The perfect servant, above suspicion." Japp stepped forward. "Reginald Graves, real name Harlan Blackwood Jr. You are under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Blackwood." Graves lunged, not for the door, but for the dagger. Poirot was faster. He caught the butler's wrist, twisting until the blade clattered to the rug. Graves sank to his knees, tears cutting channels through the powder on his cheeks. "The raven," he whispered. "It was supposed to protect us." Poirot knelt beside him. "The raven protected no one. It was always a lie." He rose, addressing the room. "The locked room was never impossible. It was orchestrated. Every clue, the feather, the poison, the duplicate key, the ivy, was planted to point elsewhere. The perfect crime, committed by the perfect servant." Lady Evelyn fainted into Clara's arms. Victor stared at Graves as though seeing a ghost. Mrs. Winters laughed once, bitter, broken. Hawthorne buried his face in his hands. Poirot turned to Japp. "The curare syringe, fingerprints will match Graves. The birth certificate is registered in Lewis. The locket was hidden in his quarters behind the service bell panel." Japp nodded. "It's over." Poirot looked up at the stained glass raven. "Non, Inspector. It is finished." Chapter 7. The Dawn Departure. The long gallery was empty now, save for dust motes drifting in the pale morning light. The stained glass raven caught the sun and threw fractured crimson across the floor. Blood that would never wash away. Hercule Poirot stood alone, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the room as though committing it to memory. The velvet cushion lay bare. The dagger, the syringe, the locket, all were boxed and sealed for Scotland Yard. The portraits of the Blackwood ancestors had been draped in black crepe. Their eyes no longer watched. Footsteps echoed. Inspector Japp entered. hat in hand. "It's done, Poirot. Graves, Harlan Blackwood Jr., has signed a full confession. Curare from Hawthorne's bag, arsenic from the garden shed, duplicate key ordered under his own name, but collected in disguise. The priest's hole, the ivy, the string trick, all his. He even planted the modern feather to keep the curse alive. Said he wanted the family to fear what they'd done to his mother." Poirot nodded. "And the others?" "Charges dropped. Victor's gambling debts will be settled by the estate sale. Clara Thorne inherits nothing but her freedom. Lady Evelyn is under Hawthorne's care. Real care this time, no morphine. Mrs. Winters returns to her cottage in the village with a pension and a warning. The opium fortune, whatever remains after restitution, goes to a home for fallen women." Fitting, Graves thought. Poirot permitted himself a small smile. "Poetic, no? The Raven's final jest." Japp offered a cigarette. Poirot declined with a wave. "I prefer my tisane. But tell me, Inspector, did Graves speak of the moment?" Japp exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. Said Sir Reginald looked up from the safe, saw him in the priest's hole doorway, and smiled. "So you're the ghost," he said. Then Graves injected him. No struggle, almost relief. Poirot turned to the window. Below, the gravel drive glittered with frost. The Blackwood Rolls-Royce waited, engine purring. Hastings stood beside it, valise in hand, looking up at the manor with something like sorrow. He forgave him, Poirot murmured. In the end, the father forgave the son. Japp crushed the cigarette beneath his boot. Forgiveness won't bring him back. But the manor will stand. National Trust, most likely. Tourists will pay sixpence to see the locked study, hear the tale of the raven. The curse becomes a postcard. Poirot's moustache twitched. Better a postcard than a prison. They descended the grand staircase together. In the entrance hall, the grandfather clock had been wound. It struck 7 with solemn authority. Graves is doing, no doubt, his last act of service. Lady Evelyn waited by the door, veiled, a small travelling case at her feet. Dr. Hawthorne supported her elbow. She approached Poirot, eyes red but steady. "Monsieur, I blamed the house, the portraits, the raven, but it was us. Thank you for seeing clearly when we could not." Poirot took her gloved hand. "Madame, the past is a shadow. Step into the light." Victor and Clara emerged from the morning room, arms linked. Victor's face was gaunt, but his eyes were clear. "Poirot, I was ready to hang for her for love. Turns out love was the only thing not poisoned here." Clara pressed a small bundle into Poirot's hands. A pressed violet from the garden, wrapped in tissue. "For your buttonhole, monsieur. Something alive from this place." Poirot tucked it into his lapel. "I accept with pleasure." Mrs. Winters appeared last, led by a constable. She paused before Poirot. "You think you've ended it, little man, but blood remembers." Poirot met her gaze, and justice forgets nothing. She was led away without another word. Graves, Harlan, waited in the courtyard, wrists cuffed, flanked by 2 officers. He had changed into a plain suit. The butler's livery was folded neatly in a trunk. He looked smaller, almost ordinary. Poirot approached. "You wish to protect the name." Graves's voice was hoarse. "I wish to be the name. 30 years polishing silver, pressing suits, tasting the master's soup for poison. And in the end, I became the poison." Poirot studied him. "Your mother, what was her name?" "Rose," Graves said softly. "She died in the workhouse. Harlan promised to fetch her. He never came." Poirot placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "Then let this be her epitaph. She loved, and was loved in return. The rest is silence. Graves bowed his head. The officers led him to the police van. As the doors closed, he looked back once, at the manor, at the Raven window, and smiled as though seeing something Poirot could not. The Rolls-Royce pulled away. Hastings settled beside Poirot, the violet bright against his lapel. "Back to London, then?" Hastings asked. "We, to order, to tisane, to the little grey cells resting after their labour." Hastings glanced back. The manor shrank in the rear window. Ivy already reclaiming the stone. "Will you miss it?" Poirot considered. "I will miss the puzzle, the people, not so much." They passed through the village. Children waved. The pub sign, the Raven's Wing, swung in the breeze. A new plaque was being hung, site of the famous locked room mystery in 1926. Hastings chuckled. "Tourist trap in the making." Poirot closed his eyes. "Every house has its story, mon ami. Some are tragedies, some are farces. This one was both." The car turned onto the London road. Behind them, Blackwood Manor stood silent, its windows blind, its secrets finally spoken. Chapter 8. The Raven's Last Flight. At 9:17 a.m., exactly 3 hours after the police van disappeared down the drive, Hercule Poirot stepped from the shadows of the long gallery. He had not left with Hastings. He had sent his friend ahead with a note. One final errand for the little grey cells. "Meet me at Victoria, 3 o'clock." Poirot moved alone through the house, Malacca cane tapping softly on the parquet. The constables had sealed the study, the priest's hole, the cellar. But Poirot carried a different key, the original study key returned to him by Japp with a gruff "Don't lose it, mind." He paused at the foot of the grand staircase. A single black feather lay on the bottom step, fresh, its tip still wet with dew. Poirot picked it up, twirled it between gloved fingers. "You are persistent, mon petit corbeau, but persistence is not proof." He ascended to the east wing. The study door stood ajar, police tape fluttering like a torn bandage. Inside, the chalk outline had been erased, but the air still carried the faint sweetness of blood and beeswax. Poirot knelt by the fireplace, ran a hand along the arras. The slit behind the tapestry, through which the feather had been dropped, was sewn shut with coarse black thread. "New, Graves's work," Poirot murmured. "Even in custody, he tidies." He moved to the desk. The safe hung open, empty save for a folded square of paper. Poirot unfolded it with tweezers. "Monsieur Poirot, you have the confession, but not the treasure. The Raven guards one last secret. Look where the first raven fell." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Harlan, or Harlan's son playing his father's game. He returned to the long gallery. The stained-glass raven glowed in the morning sun, its eye a chip of ruby. Poirot tapped the frame. Hollow. He pressed the ruby. The panel swung inward on concealed hinges. Behind, a narrow cavity. Inside lay a leather pouch, heavy with coin, and a second journal, smaller, bound in raven feathers. Poirot carried both to the morning room, locked the door, and opened the pouch. Gold sovereigns, 1849 mint, Harlan's era. Enough to buy a small estate. The journal's first page bore a single line in Harlan's spidery hand. "If I vanish, the raven will lead my son to what is rightfully his." Poirot read on. The entries detailed the opium fortune's laundering, gold hidden in the manor's foundations, the priest's hole, the chimney. Harlan had not died in 1850. He had faked his disappearance, fled to Cairo with a fraction of the gold, and pawned the dagger to fund his new life. The curse was a smokescreen to keep the family from searching. Graves, Harlan Jr., had discovered the journal months ago, hidden behind the stained glass panel. He believed the gold was his birthright. When Sir Reginald planned to expose the fraud and donate the estate, Graves acted. The murder was not just for inheritance. It was to protect the treasure's location. Poirot closed the journal. So, the raven was never a curse. It was a map. He returned to the study, pried up the hearthstone marked with a faint raven carving. Beneath, a tin box. Inside, a map of the manor, X's marking caches. The largest X was beneath the wine cellar floor. Poirot summoned the village constable by telephone. "Send men to the cellar. Bring pickaxes." By noon, the cellar floor was up. Beneath, a stone slab, the blackwood crest carved deep. Lifted, it revealed a cavity lined with oilskin. Inside, gold bars stamped with the East India Company seal, and a final letter from Harlan to his unborn son. "Take what is yours, but let the raven fly. The house has suffered enough." Poirot stood in the cellar as the gold was catalogued. The constable whistled. "Enough to rebuild the village twice over." Poirot nodded. "It will go to restitution. Opium victims' families, the workhouse where Rose died. The manor will stand, but the raven will be painted white." He returned upstairs one last time. In the entrance hall, the grandfather clock struck 12. Poirot opened the glass face, moved the hands forward to 12:17, then stopped the pendulum. The manor fell, silent. Footsteps on the gravel outside. Hastings's voice, "Poirot! The train!" Poirot met him at the door. "One moment, mon ami." He placed the fresh raven's feather on the hall table, beside a single gold sovereign. A note in his neat hand, for the National Trust. Let the raven remind visitors. Secrets buried deepest are the ones that fly farthest. They boarded the Rolls-Royce. As it pulled away, Poirot looked back. The manor stood bathed in sunlight, ivy gleaming like emerald. A real raven circled the chimney once, then wheeled toward the downs. Hastings asked, "All finished?" Poirot smiled. "The puzzle, oui. The story, never. Every house keeps one room locked. We have merely changed the key." The car turned onto the London road. Behind them, Blackwood Manor began its new life. Museum, monument, warning. The raven was gone, but its shadow would linger in every tour guide's tale, every child's whisper. Did you see it? The ghost with the golden eyes. Chapter 9. The 3:15 to Victoria. The 3:15 from Lewes to Victoria was nearly empty. A single first-class compartment, green leather seats, the faint scent of coal smoke and polished brass. Hercule Poirot sat by the window, Malacca cane across his knees, the pressed violet from Clara still bright in his buttonhole. Captain Hastings opposite, valise stowed, newspaper folded to the racing results. Outside, the Sussex Downs rolled past in watercolour greens and golds. Blackwood Manor was already a memory, a smudge on the horizon. Hastings cleared his throat. "I say, Poirot, did we leave anything behind?" Poirot did not look up from the passing landscape. "Only ghosts, mon ami, and ghosts travel light." The train slowed for a signal. A boy on a bicycle raced alongside, waving. Poirot raised a gloved hand in salute. The boy grinned, then vanished behind a hedge. Hastings unfolded the newspaper. Front page already. Butler Hare confesses to Blackwood murder. Treasure trove unearthed. They've got a photograph of Graves in cuffs and another of the gold. The Trust is calling it the Raven Hoard. Poirot's moustache twitched. Predictable. The English love a hoard. They will queue for sixpence to see the priest's hole, touch the dagger, buy a postcard of the raven. The truth becomes souvenir. Hastings turned the page. Letter to the editor from Mrs. Winters. Claims the gold is cursed. Says the raven will return. Load of rot. "No," Poirot said softly. "She believes. Belief is stronger than rot. It is why Graves killed, why Harlan fled, why Rose died in the workhouse. Belief in blood, in birthright in ravens. The train lurched forward. A tea trolley rattled past. Poirot ordered 2 cups, no sugar. Hastings watched the steam curl. What will happen to them, do you think? The survivors? Poirot sipped. Lady Evelyn has taken a cottage in Devon. Dr. Hawthorne accompanies her, not as lover, but as physician. The morphine is gone, the sleepwalking cured. She will plant roses, white ones. Clara and Victor, married yesterday. Quiet ceremony in the village church. Victor has sold his London flat, bought a small garage in Brighton. Clara will keep the books. They will argue over petrol receipts and forget the manor ever existed. And Mrs. Winters? Poirot set down his cup. She has returned to her cottage. The pension is generous. She feeds the ravens every morning, stale bread, a saucer of milk. She tells them stories of Harlan, of Rose, of the son who almost won. The birds listen. Birds always listen. Hastings folded the newspaper. And Graves? Poirot's gaze drifted to the window. A raven flew parallel to the train, wings beating in perfect rhythm with the wheels. He hangs next month, Wandsworth. He asked for no appeal, only one request, that the pressed violet from Clara be placed in his coffin. Something alive, he said. The warden agreed. Silence stretched, companionable. The train whistle sounded again, Victoria approaching. Hastings shifted. I keep thinking of the feather on the staircase, the one you left with the sovereign. Was it a message? Poirot smiled, the first genuine smile of the journey. A full stop, mon ami. The sentence is complete. The raven has delivered its last secret, now it may rest. The train slowed, brakes sighing. London's smoke replaced the Downs' clean air. Porters shouted, doors slammed. Poirot stood, adjusted his Homburg. Hastings gathered the valise. Back to Whitehaven Mansions, then, tisane and order. Order, oui, but first, Poirot produced a small parcel, wrapped in brown paper. A gift for Miss Lemon. Raven feather bookmarks. She will appreciate the irony. They stepped onto the platform. The raven was gone, lost in the city's grey. That evening, in the orderly flat, Poirot arranged his correspondence. A letter from the National Trust. The manor opens Easter. Your name on the plaque beside the priest's hole. Solved by Hercule Poirot, 1926. Another from Clara. A wedding photograph, her smile bright, Victor's hand steady on her waist. On the back, thank you for the garage, and for the future. A third, in Graves's careful butler's hand, smuggled out by the warden. Monsieur, the violet is pressed between the pages of Harlan's journal. I read it every night. The raven was never a curse. It was a promise to fly free. I fly soon. Tell Rose I kept the name clean. H. Poirot placed the letter in a cedar box labelled Affaires Classées. He locked it, pocketed the key and turned to the window. London's lights flickered like 1,000 small fires. Hastings entered with the Evening Post. Anything interesting? Poirot shook his head. Only the usual. A Maharaja's emerald, a colonel's wife, a disappearing clergyman, the little grey cells. They never rest. He poured 2 glasses of sirop de cassis. They raised them to the night. To the living, Poirot said, and to the dead, Hastings replied. Outside, a single raven perched on the sill, cocked its head, then took flight into the dark, wings silent, shadow long. Chapter 10. The Order of Small Things. The fire in Poirot's sitting room burned low, a single coal glowing like a raven's eye. The room was exactly as it had been before the summons. Books alphabetized, shoes in pairs, camellia perfect in its vase. Yet the air carried the faint scent of Sussex rain and pressed violets. Poirot sat in the green velvet armchair, a small cedar box open on his lap. Inside, the raven feather bookmark, the pressed violet, Harlan's final letter, the gold sovereign. He arranged them in a precise square, then closed the lid. Hastings entered with a tray, 2 cups of tisane, no sugar, a plate of langue de chat. Miss Lemon's gone home. Said to tell you the files are immaculate. She's even labelled the raven feather Exhibit R 1926. Poirot smiled. She understands order. Hastings settled opposite. Funny thing, post came after you locked the box. From the National Trust. He handed over a crisp envelope. Poirot slit it with the silver letter opener. Inside, a brass plaque, still warm from the engraver. Blackthorn Manor, the locked study, solved by Hercule Poirot. 17 Tartar 20, October 1926. The raven flies at midnight. Poirot turned the plaque in the firelight. They have chosen poetry over precision. Acceptable. He placed it beside the cedar box. Silence stretched, comfortable as an old coat. Hastings broke it. Do you ever wonder, Poirot, what if Graves had simply asked, told Sir Reginald who he was, asked for the gold, the name, the place at table? Poirot considered. Every day, mon ami, but some doors open only when knocked with fear. Graves knocked with a syringe. He rose, crossed to the window. London slept under a thin frost. A taxi's headlights swept the embankment, then vanished. Still, Poirot continued, he left one door ajar, the violet. He asked for life in his coffin. A small thing, but order begins with small things. Hastings joined him. Clara sent a telegram. They've named the garage Raven Motors. Cheeky. Poirot chuckled. Appropriate. The Raven now sells petrol and spark plugs. Progress. Another envelope lay on the mat. Hand-delivered. No stamp. Poirot opened it. A single raven feather and a note in Mrs. Winters's spidery hand. The birds still come. I tell them you won. They do not believe me. A.W. Poirot tucked the feather into the cedar box. Belief is stubborn like ivy. The telephone rang, sharp, insistent. Hastings answered. Yes, he's here, I see. He covered the mouthpiece. Scotland Yard, Wandsworth. Graves, Harlan, has refused breakfast. Asked if you would accept a visitor tomorrow. Last request. Poirot took the receiver. The warden's voice was gravel. He says he has one more secret, Mr. Poirot. Something about the raven's eye. Won't tell anyone else. Poirot's gaze drifted to the plaque. Tell him 10 a.m. I will bring tisane. He hung up. Hastings raised an eyebrow. You'll go. Natural element. A secret shared is a burden halved, even on the eve of the rope. The fire settled into embers. Poirot poured the last of the tisane, handed Hastings a cup. To small things, Poirot said. They clinked porcelain. Wandsworth Prison, 10:03 a.m. The cell was clean, whitewashed, a single barred window high in the wall. Graves, Harlan, sat on the cot in a grey suit, hands folded. The violet lay on the blanket, pressed between glass slides like a museum specimen. Poirot took the wooden chair. A warder stood outside, door ajar. Graves spoke first. You came. I'm a man of my word. Graves gestured to the violet. It travelled well. Tell Clara the colour is still true. Poirot nodded. The raven's eye? What is it? Graves reached into his pocket, produced a tiny object wrapped in tissue. Unwrapped. A ruby, pigeon's blood, the size of a pea. The missing eye from the stained glass raven. I pried it out the night before the murder, Graves said. Harlan's map said the ruby marked the final cache, under the chapel floor. Gold enough for a new life. I was going to take it after the reading of the will. When Sir Reginald changed his mind, he shrugged. The eye stayed in my pocket, through everything. Poirot turned the gem in the light. You offer it now. To the trust. For Rose's workhouse, let the raven see clearly at last. Poirot pocketed the ruby. It will be done. Graves leaned forward. One more thing. The real curse was never the house. It was silence. Harlan never spoke her name. I never spoke mine. Speak it now, monsieur, for the record. Poirot met his eyes. Harlan Blackwood, Jr., son of Rose, keeper of the flame. Graves closed his eyes. A tear tracked the groove beside his nose. Thank you. The warder knocked. Time. Poirot stood. You fly tomorrow. Graves smiled, the first real smile Poirot had seen on him, with a violet in my fist. Whitehaven Mansions, that evening. The cedar box now held the ruby, the violet, the feather, the sovereign. Poirot locked it, placed the key on his watch chain.